Good morning, grade 4. Welcome to math class. And here we are. We're going to be learning about adding today, which is something that you have known how to do since you were probably in grade 1, maybe even in kindergarten. So when we do adding, you've already worked with regrouping. So when you have 10 ones, you carry the 1 to the tens column, and then when you have 10 tens, you carry the 1 over to the hundreds, and when you have 100 ones, when you have 10 hundreds, you carry 1 over and make it 1,000. So today we're going to be adding with tenths. So there's nothing new. We're going to be doing exactly the same thing. So when you were adding, let's say you added 2 numbers together and your answer was 12. We know that we can't have 2 numbers as the answer, so we're going to take that 1 and carry it over to this row, which means this one is going to turn into a 4. Just like when we're adding, if we were adding 7 and 8 together, the answer is 15. And if there were ones in front of them, we'd have to carry the 1 to the next row, and then that would turn into a 9. This is just how we were doing, how we've always been doing math when we are regrouping. So we're going to we can't have 18 there, so we're going to take that 1 and move it over here. And there's a 7 there, so when we put the 1 with the 7, we now have 8 ones and 8 tenths. So we are going to do this activity where you need to regroup so that each place value has a single digit. Because when we add, unless it's the very last addition problem, we can't have 2 numbers down in our answer. So we always have to regroup, carry it to the top of the next row, and add it into that row. So what you're going to do is regroup. You may need to regroup twice. So I'm going to ask you to pause and look at this and see if you can figure out what the answers are, and then come back. Okay. So I see 16 here. I can't have that. So I'm going to take this 1, and I'm going to move it up to this row, which is going to make that 5 turn into a 6. There's only 6 there, so I don't need to regroup with the tens. Here I have 18, so I'm going to take that 1. I'm going to move him up to here. So this is going to turn into a 12. I have 12 ones, which I can't have because that's larger than 9. So I'm going to take that 1 and I'm going to move it up to the tens, and now I'll have 4 tens, and I'll be left with 2 ones and 8 tenths. Here I need to take my 1 and add it over here, which means I'm now going to have 11, which I can't have. So I'm going to take my 1 and add it over here, which would make that into a 6. I hope that you got this when you were doing it. So I take my 1, I'm going to add it over to my 12, which makes that a 13. I can't have that 1, so I'm going to carry it over here, and that's going to make that into a 5. And my last one, can't have 16, so I'm going to take my 1 and I'm going to move it over to this row, so now I have 22. I can't have 22, so I'm going to take this 2 and add it to the 7, which is going to make a 9. So I hope you remember how we did that when we learned how to do carrying or regrouping in grade 2. So here we have a question. It is 3 and 6 tenths and 5 and 1 tenth. And when we add them up, it's just like how we've always been adding. We just have to remember to line up the decimals. They have to be on top of each other. So 6 plus 1 is 7. I'm going to have to put my decimal there, and otherwise it's not a tenth anymore. And then 3 and 5 would be 8. My answer here would be 8 and 7 tenths. So here's my question, 6 and 2 tenths and 1 and 7 tenths. And I put it into my chart. Did I do it right? No, I did not line up my decimals. I did not put them on top of each other. So I will rewrite this so that it is a 1 decimal 7. Now I can add. 2 and 7 is 9. Put my decimal there. 6 and 1 is 7. So my answer is 7 and 9 tenths. So now you're going to be doing adding just like that. You're going to need a scrap piece of paper, and I want you to add these numbers together. Make sure that you are lining up your decimals. So pause and do that. Okay, now you're back. I'm going to line them up. I'm just going to line up the second one underneath the first one. So when I add 4 plus 5 is 9, decimal plus decimal is decimal, and 3 plus 1 is 4. I'm going to take my other one and line it up underneath there so that my decimals are on top of each other, and that is 7, decimal, 6. So 6 and 7/10. Line up my decimals. That would be 7, and that would be 9. I'm going to line up my decimals here. 2, 7, 5. So I got my tenths, my ones, my tens, my hundreds all nicely lined up. That would be 8, decimal 9, 7, 3. So I hope that you got all of those right when you were practicing. And here we have some more adding. So we are going to be adding, but this time we're going to probably have to do some carrying. So let's check this out. Let's go and try it. 5 plus 4 is 9, and our decimal. Don't forget that decimal, otherwise your answer becomes totally wrong. 3 plus 1 is 4, and 2 plus nothing is 2. So our answer is 24 and 9/10. Ooh, 7 plus 5, that would be 12. So I have to carry my 1 to the next row. Just like we did on this sheet, we just carried it to the next row to the ones. So here we are going to add it up with the ones. So we have 1 plus 2 is 3, and 3 plus 3 is 6. Now see, if I don't put my decimal down, my answer is 62. I don't think that almost 3 chocolate bars and 3.5 chocolate bars is going to equal 62 chocolate bars. So don't forget that decimal. It is super important. Now I have 6 holes and 2 parts. 8 plus 4 is 12. Carry the 1. I'm going to put that decimal there. I always put it right away so I don't forget it. 5, 6, 7, 8. Ooh, that's 9, 10. Have to carry my 1, so that is going to become a 2. 208 and 2/10. 1 and 2 is 3. Decimal. 4 and 1 is 5. 4 and 6 is 10. 5, 6, 7, and a 1. Oh, a bonus one. Okay, here we go. 7 plus 6 is 13. 9 and 1 is 10. 10 and 6 is 16. 5, 6, and 5. So there you go. The most important thing with adding is to remember to line up those decimals, because if they're not lined up, it's going to cause a huge problem for you. So now my next numbers that I'm going to be adding together, I see a slight problem. One of those two numbers does not have a decimal. 32 does not have a decimal. But if we were to put a decimal in there, where do you think it would go? So it would not change the number. So it still has to be 32 wholes. You're right, the decimal has to go at the end, and behind it you would put a 0. So that means 32 wholes and no parts. So now that I have a decimal here, I can add them together. So I'm going to put 32 decimal 4 plus, and I got to line up those decimals, super important, 4.7, 4 and 7/10, and now I can add. 0 and 7 is 7. Decimal 6, 3. So 32 plus 4 and 7/10 is 36 and 7/10. So here's my number without a decimal. Same number. Was 4 holes, still 4 holes, and no parts. Still the same number. So I'm going to rewrite my numbers, and I'm going to add them. 7 plus 0 is 7. 3 plus 4, oops, I forgot my decimal, is 7, and 1. 17 and 7/10. Here my number is 16. It doesn't have a decimal, but I can write it with a decimal, and now I can add 16 and 0/10 plus 2 and 3/10 will equal 3, 8, 1. 18 and 3/10. So here's my number without a decimal. So if I rewrite that with the decimal, it's still exactly the same number. I'm just saying that there's no parts. And I'm going to add 14 and 7/10. So 0 and 7 is 7. 8 and 4 is 12. Carry the 1, and I have 57 and 7/10. So I hope that you see that this adding is exactly the same as the adding you've been doing all along since grade 1. All you have to do is make sure you line up those decimals and make sure you put your decimal in your answer. So I'm going to stop the video and we'll continue in a minute and when you go to the next video.